Let me describe two organizations. The first runs a food bank in a mid-sized American city. It applied to the IRS for tax-exempt status, a formal process that took months, cost hundreds of dollars in fees, and required detailed documentation of its programs, its governance, and its finances. Every year it files a Form 990, a public document that discloses its executive salaries, its overhead ratios, and every significant vendor contract. Any American can look it up online, right now. The second operates from a building it calls a church. It applied for nothing, it paid nothing, it files no annual financial report. Its executive compensation, which may run into 7 figures, is not disclosed to the public, the IRS, or the congregation's own members. No one outside the organization can verify where the money goes. Both organizations are tax-exempt under the same section of the Internal Revenue Code. Both receive the same federal tax benefits, income tax exemption, tax-deductible donations. One is accountable to the public, one is not. Tonight on Words with Wentz, we are going to talk about why, and why it matters far beyond the question of money. The Internal Revenue Code creates 2 distinct tracks for tax-exempt organizations. Under IRC Section 501, C3, both secular nonprofits and religious organizations are eligible for tax-exempt status. But how they get there, and what they owe the public in return, is radically different. Secular nonprofits must apply. They file IRS Form 1023, a detailed application reviewed by IRS examiners. They pay filing fees. They demonstrate that their organizational structure and operations meet the 5 legal requirements for exemption. Only after approval do they receive tax-exempt status. Churches do not apply. Under IRC Section 508, C1a, churches are automatically exempt. No application, no review, no IRS determination letter required, and the accountability gap is even wider on the ongoing side. Almost every tax-exempt organization in America, hospitals, universities, environmental groups, food banks, must file an annual Form 990. That form discloses executive salaries, program spending ratios, vendor payments, and governance practices. It is a public document. IRS Publication 1828, the Tax Guide for Churches, states plainly, churches are not required to file an annual Form 990. There is one more asymmetry worth naming. If a secular nonprofit fails to file its Form 990 for 3 consecutive years, it automatically loses its tax-exempt status. That is federal law. That same rule does not apply to churches. Same tax benefits, different rules. That is not a theological decision, that is a policy choice, and it has consequences. When there is no required financial disclosure, it takes investigative journalists and watchdog organizations to document where the money actually goes. Ministry Watch, an independent investigative project tracking faith-based media ministries, has documented that dozens of high-profile prosperity gospel operations run private aircraft fleets. A single Gulfstream or Citation X private jet costs between $15 and $65 million to purchase, and between $1 and $2 million per year to operate. High-profile televangelists have reported net worths ranging from $40 million to upward of $300 million, often tied to multi-million-dollar parsonage estates and private jet fleets. Now consider what that same money could do if directed toward the charitable purposes these organizations claim as their tax-exempt purpose. A $15 million jet purchase is equivalent to 1.5 million meals through domestic food bank networks. The annual operating cost of that jet, $1 to $2 million, could fund 20 to 40 full college scholarships for low-income students, or 40 full-time mental health counselors in underserved communities. A $10 million parsonage estate could build a fully equipped community health clinic. I am not saying these organizations cannot spend their money as they choose. I am saying that because they are exempt from filing a Form 990, neither their congregations nor the American taxpayers who subsidize their tax exemption can see where those dollars actually go. A secular food bank has to disclose its director's salary. A prosperity gospel televangelist with a $300 million net worth does not. Now I want to connect something that may not be obvious, but that I believe is the most important point of this episode. In episodes 2 and 3 of this series, we documented 2 organizations registered with the Department of Justice, under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. FARA Registration Number 7653, Show Faith by Works LLC, whose foreign principal was the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and FARA Registration Number 7649, Clock Tower X, connected to a foreign-funded media and influence operation. Both operations ran their influence campaigns through faith-based channels, geo-fenced advertising targeting specific Christian congregations, curated content pipelines designed to shape the beliefs of American Christian audiences, digital infrastructure embedded inside the same churches and denominations that are exempt from the financial disclosure requirements we just discussed. That is not a coincidence. It is a strategic calculation. The regulatory exemption that shields a prosperity gospel televangelist's private jet from public scrutiny is the same exemption that shields a foreign-funded faith-based influence operation from the financial transparency that would expose it. The church exemption from Form 990 is not just a problem of domestic accountability. It is a documented vulnerability in America's defenses against foreign influence. When you cannot see the money, you cannot follow it. And when you cannot follow it, you cannot know whose interests are actually being served from the pulpit. The law as written reflects a genuine constitutional tension. The First Amendment's Establishment Clause limits how deeply the government can reach into the internal affairs of religious organizations. That is a legitimate concern, and one this episode takes seriously. But there is a difference between protecting religious autonomy and granting financial invisibility to organizations receiving billions of dollars in annual federal tax subsidies. The IRS cannot initiate an audit of a church without written approval from a high-level Treasury official, a restriction that does not apply to any other class of tax-exempt organization. This restriction was designed to protect religious freedom. In practice, it means that the largest faith-based financial operations in America are also the hardest for federal regulators to examine. The Supreme Court ruled in Bob Jones University v. United States in 1983 that tax-exempt status can be revoked when an organization's activities violate fundamental public policy. That ruling established a principle: tax exemption is a public benefit, and it comes with a public obligation. What the law does not currently require is basic financial transparency from organizations that collect billions of dollars in tax-deductible donations, pay no income tax, pay no property tax in most states, and face no annual public accounting of how those dollars are spent. That gap is not a constitutional requirement. It is a legislative choice, and it can be changed. I want to be clear about what I am and what I am not saying. I am not saying churches should not exist. I'm not saying faith communities do not provide genuine, irreplaceable value to the people they serve, because they do. I know that firsthand. I'm not saying every church is a prosperity gospel operation or a foreign influence vehicle. The vast majority of American faith communities are led by honest people doing genuine good with limited resources. What I am saying, as a paralegal who has read these filings, is that the same federal tax benefits that support a local congregation's food pantry also support a televangelist's private jet fleet and a foreign ministry's influence campaign. And the public can document all three of the first. It can document almost none of the second or third. Accountability is not an attack on faith. Transparency is not hostility to religion. When the federal government grants a tax exemption, it is making a decision that the American taxpayer subsidizes, and the American taxpayer has a right to know where that subsidy goes. The food bank has to tell you. The hospital has to tell you. The university has to tell you. The prosperity gospel televangelist does not. The foreign-funded faith-based influence operation does not. And under the current law, neither has to. The documents are in the description. This is Words with Wentz. Know your rights.